30% of India actually lives in the urban centers today, or the cities in this country. Quite interestingly, it's going to get to about 50% in the next 20 years. That means we are going to have close to about 600 million people living in cities in this country. If you really look at this map, this also tells you something very interesting, that it's the cities which drives connectivity. It is the cities which drive prosperity in the world. If you really talk about cities like Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, they have a sense of character, or they actually have a certain kind of a vision or a point of view. If you talk about Bangalore, what is Bangalore all about? Bangalore is about IT. Mumbai is about creativity. Or when you talk about Delhi, Delhi is actually all about arrogance, and so on and so forth. So if you really look at it, there's something very interesting that actually happens in terms of how cities move, how cities actually live. And there's something called the 4 T's here. And what are these 4 T's all about? 4 T's means technology, tolerance, talent, and territorial assets. If I actually dig deeper into all these things, I'll actually start getting some very interesting insights. It actually gives me huge bits of ideas as to what this society is all about. So the first one, if you really look at it, there is also something called as governance. And there is something like a missing element that we talk about in governance in this part of the world, and especially when I talk about India. And if you talk about Delhi, it is actually even more profound. There are 2 laws that I've actually picked up there. One is called Art of Bad Design. Quite interestingly, if you really look at the Rautularam Marg flyover, it was one of the most horribly designed locations in the whole world. There's also something called as the art of designing stupid, or the art of short-sightedness. And Delhi functions that way quite often. This is exactly art of short-sightedness. This is a very interesting place wherein you can actually bike through or you can walk through. Or this is actually a bus stand, but you just cannot pass through. So what you're doing here is that you're actually trying to create a lot of hurdles for people to actually enjoy the city. City is about a certain way of living. It is actually about enjoying the environment. It's about absorbing the nature that is around us. Because if you really look at the design factors, we are simply getting curtailed, or we are simply not being allowed to move ahead. This is a place called Gurgaon. From my point of view, Gurgaon is actually an urban disaster. It's a great experiment. It is one of the most interesting places in the world. I always say it's a laboratory for people to come in and learn what not to do. So if you really look at it, Gurgaon is one very interesting place. In fact, a few statistics about Gurgaon for you. This is one city which is not sustainable at all. The water table has gone down to 300 feet. That means we are simply living in a desert. If you actually go towards the Aravalis, it is down to 600 feet. That means we are living in absolutely a desert. We are actually living in a place which could actually crumble. In fact, the whole city has been designed in such a way that if there is an earthquake like Nepal, we are expecting that 8 million people will die in the city of Delhi or Gurgaon. This is a very interesting picture about what happens in our cities. We actually go out and say, oh, people are actually taking bath on the streets. They're defecating in the open. We actually debate that. We actually look at the problems. But we do not understand why is it actually happening. This raises a very interesting question. And that question is that are we building our cities for the rich or for the poor? Or are we creating the cities for the citizenry of the place? Today we actually face a problem. The cities of this country are being made for the rich or the super rich. And that's the hierarchy that we actually see. But what matters? These are the 4 things that actually matter. One is transportation. What about transportation? It is about productivity. How do I actually move people? What is the kind of loss that I actually see in this country because of traffic jams every day? A very simple back-of-the-envelope calculation. And that is that 1,200 man-years are lost every day in the city of Delhi because of traffic jams. We do not even look at that picture. $300 million worth of oil is wasted every year in the city because of traffic jams. So what do we do? In a place wherein we are actually talking about the most polluted city in the world, or the most polluted cities in the world. Today, when you talk about Delhi being #1 polluted city in the world, we talk about Ludhiana, probably even worse. You're actually being saying that you're smoking close to about 50 cigarettes every day. There was a whole huge hulla when Obama came into this part of the world, and it said Obama reduced 6 minutes of his lifespan. This is actually a crisis that we're facing, and we are simply not even talking about it. What is it that we are doing about this crisis? Are we even looking at changing this crisis, or are we fighting this crisis? The second one is power. There is no power available. Then you actually have a political class which says, I'm going to give free power. But the question here is, do we have the infrastructure to actually give power to people? Do we have the basic wherewithal? And how do we actually give clean power? What are the solutions that we can look at? The next is water. Water is the most critical point. When you talk about cities in this world, The next set of wars are actually going to be on water. People talk about water, but they do not understand that what are the implications of water. There are already indications. There are indications where people fight on parking spaces. They kill for a bucket of water. In Delhi, there have been incidents where people have killed each other for a bucket of water. 5% of the forest cover for the state of Haryana. Delhi is supposed to be 33%. It is 19%. That means the cities are getting devoid of lungs. In fact, today I see one of my neighbors actually cut down a tree which was about 60 years old, and I couldn't do anything at all. One tree that you cut, you're actually saying that you're taking away humanity. We're already sitting at a cusp of change, wherein we are saying that the sixth mass extinction is already here. We are sitting at the cusp of that idea, or mass extinction. So if we are facing that, we need to actually act very, very quickly. We build concrete jungles. This is how our cities are. This is what old Delhi is all about. In fact, we also talk about rag pickers. Rag pickers are important. They should not be discriminated against. And why do you say they're important? They're important because they make our cities clean. They actually try to bifurcate. They're part of a value chain in the whole system, wherein they are actually trying to create a lot of value add. And we do not respect this either. We do not understand the implications that we actually face because of this whole idea or the whole dirt that we are actually living with. Recently, I went to a place called Bhagalpur. In fact, Bhagalpur was the worst city that I've ever seen in the world. In fact, it was actually a tragedy to be in that city because poverty hits you on the face. And the second thing that you see is that it is actually very dirty. How do we drive? How do we drive on the roads? What happens is the battles that we are fighting is that each one of you in this room, in fact, if I ask you a question, if this room catches fire, what do you think is a constant that's going to happen? There would be a stampede, right? And why? Because that is a reflection of an attitude that we carry. That's the same reflection that we see on the road. We cannot build or we cannot look at the idea of queuing. Delhi is actually a reflection of that arrogant attitude. Delhi is a reflection where people want to cross each other. So my battle every day is, oh, meri gaadi or my car should be ahead of the other one, rather than saying that my battle should be for the betterment of humanity. Let's change the battles that we fight every day. If we are not going to change the battles that we fight every day, we are actually going to be a society wherein we are going to kill each other. We already are. We need to change that. In fact, if you really look at it, there's some very interesting experiences that I actually have on the road in terms of discrimination. Sometimes I drive a bike or a bicycle. It's here. Quite interestingly, I've faced 3 interesting incidents when I drive a bike and how I am discriminated against. The first incident was when I actually went to a 5-star hotel. The 5-star hotel did not allow me to come in because they said, oh, people on bikes are not allowed. That's shocking. In fact, my first experience with biking was in Basel, in Switzerland, wherein I saw that there was a managing director of a bank who came to a conference on a bicycle. Why can't we do that? Why can't we actually accept people being on a bicycle? In fact, the second thing that actually happened, I went to a club in Gurgaon. They actually threw me out. They never let me in. In fact, they said, oh, you don't seem to be the right guy. I actually went to a meeting for a confederation meeting or an industry body meeting. And the guard himself, I should have actually been one with him. And in fact, he said, oh, you cannot go inside. Aap kya AC theek karne aaye? So, why can't a person come on a bicycle? What do we need to do that? Why this discrimination that we actually face? Why can't we actually say that society is just and all? In fact, today, what we see is a very interesting discrimination in terms of the guy who's driving a bigger car is a guy who's actually higher up in society. So what we have done is that we have actually created another hierarchy in society. We have moved from one caste system to a capitalistic caste system, which is actually very, very demeaning. In fact, this is about urbanization, a picture that I wanted to show to you. But this is about discrimination again. This is what reality is. This is CP in the night. There is a kid who's on the street or who's begging. And why does it actually happen? Are we creating a cities where people are actually just humane or not? In fact, when you talk about slavery, today we have become slaves to the reality of automobiles. All of you here, 90% of you, would actually be owning cars or a certain set of cars. Each one of you would be dreaming, oh, my next car should be a bigger car. Why can't you dream of something else? Why can't we dream of a place where we could actually be biking around? You know, Chandigarh is a very interestingly designed city, but the reality of Chandigarh is very, very scary. 90% of Chandigarh people do not even go out for a walk. right? They do not even go out. It's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. In fact, the Chandigarh administration also does something very interesting. They were talking for 10 years that we need to have a metro in a city. Come on, a city which is just 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers does not need a metro, right? So there is something else. There are very interesting forces that actually work. So if any one of you is from Chandigarh, will understand that you can actually bike from one location to the other. You can easily do that. Because, in fact, a lot of people will say, "Arey nahi, I can't do this because I'm going to be discriminated against. People will look down upon me." In fact, I was actually doing a job as a professor before I got fired. In fact, I always say, as a side note, till the time you're not fired in your life once, that means you have not achieved enough. And I actually went there. I used to go on a bike. My director said, "Come on, what is the kind of thing that you're showing to your students? You are coming on a bike, this is actually bad for you. People are actually going to hate you, or this is just not right. A professor cannot come on a bicycle." In this country, we talk about democracy, and the democracy is actually about all the people that we have. But let's understand, are we doing anything for the rest of the people who are not driving the cars? We are not really making the cities for them. We need to design cities of tomorrow, which are actually going to be for the people, wherein all set of people can move. All set of people can actually enjoy the territorial asset that actually exists. If we do not do that, what are we doing? This is a very interesting picture from Amsterdam. I was recently in Amsterdam, and I actually saw this, and I said, okay, this is something wow that I need to look at. I need my country to be like this. This is Austria, Vienna. In fact, this is the society that we need to look at in the future. This is what it needs to be. In fact, a lot of you will complain, Delhi is very hot. In fact, I always say it is all bullshit, right? Indians are the most obese set of people, right? I'm presenting myself here. But the question is, if you talk about obesity, why does that actually happen? We are not moving adequately. We are not doing things right. And if you really look at it, we are not even taking care of health. And how do we solve this problem that actually exists? The idea is going to be about tolerance. And the tolerance idea is that we need to start respecting different various or different sets of views that actually exist. The first thing, this is about tolerance. In fact, there have been a lot of set of incidents where people are going against gays and lesbians. We need to accept, we need to actually be very tolerant to different sets of people. If you're not going to be tolerant, we are not going to be a just and a humane society. We are not going to grow. In fact, the cities which in the world which have done very well are the cities which are very tolerant. What is the difference between Bombay and what is the difference between Delhi? Mumbai is a very tolerant place. They accept people from different sets of places. If you talk about Toronto, if you talk about Vancouver, or if you talk about the United States, they've accepted different set of people across the board, and that has actually done wonders for them. Today, I'm not able to accept people from different sets of caste or different sets of places. I decide my friends depending on the job that they actually have, or depending on the position that they actually have, or depending on the money that they actually have. We need to create a system wherein we are able to finish that whole idea of wealth. Wealth is something which is important, but it has to go away. So what is the call for action that we need to actually have? If you really talk about it, it's going to be you as the generation of change, generation of strife. If you are the generation of strife, you have to bring that change yourself. It's not going to be anybody else. In fact, quite a lot of times we say somebody else has to do something. No, it is you. A man is always known by the contribution he makes, nothing else. And then, of course, we have to reclaim our cities. How do we reclaim our cities? What is the action that we actually do? The action is going to be, we have to do something which helps us in increasing productivity, sustainability, health, and it's a great leveler. And each one of these actions could actually be done, and we can become one with nature. How do we become one with nature? How do we enjoy nature? How do we actually do something within this part of the world? And then, of course, there's going to be about 3 sets of people who can bring in the change. And these 3 sets of people, one of them is going to be driven by you, civil society and corporations, and of course government. You have to tell a government that we need this change to actually happen. And how do we bring that change? In fact, I can and I will. In fact, what I want to say is that you can and you will. And what is that action? The first and the foremost action is that we need to actually, quite interestingly, get on our bikes, right or not? And if you really want to get on a bike, there's something very interesting. What I say is, the first and the foremost thing that we will have to do to really call that action is bike it, right? You are the generation which has to do it. Thank you.